It's time for the Wrestling Observer Extra.
One more time for old time's sake.
With Dave Meltzer, right here on The Law, live audio wrestling.
And let's go. We're now smoking with the best.
Hour 2 of The Law, just after 1 a.m. Still to come in this hour. Title about trivia. Along with that, we're going to air a bit of an interview with Lenny Poffo as well. But before we get there, we kick off the hour going to San Jose to chat with the editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Dave Meltzer, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing all right. Now, Dave, we know you haven't gotten to TLC tonight, but Final Battle was Friday night and included a few surprises, one in particular being the fact that it may be obsolete in ROH. Matt Hardy showing up. This is a very interesting scenario that happened. This really did come down to the wire from what we heard. So how did this all come about?
Matt Hardy, the decision as far as Matt Hardy wrestling for Ring of Honor against the Young Bucks, the Hardys and the Young Bucks in April, I think that didn't come down to the wire, but the ability to air that tape came down to like the last second TNA finally gave its approval. I mean, you guys may know more than me. I'm just thinking that, what makes sense is that, the Fight Network essentially owns TNA.
Yeah.
Not officially, but they're running TNA.
Yeah.
And Ring of Honor is on the Fight Network.
That's
so
right.
There's no point in them being at odds and sticklers about things like that. It makes sense for them to help each other. Right now, it was something that the Young Bucks have been wanting to do, and they were able to pull it off because at that point, the Hardys' contracts will actually be up, and so they could do the match, and they, and the whole situation is whether the Hardys stay with TNA or not with a new deal, they're going to be able to do the match, and but TNA did have to get approval for Brandy Rhodes and Matt Hardy's videos being on that show, and they did.
So it'll be interesting where do we see this feud develop? Do we just see it develop on Ring of Honor TV, or do we see it cross over on both shows? Because like you said, the Fight Network would want to have both.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I'm sure that it'll be promoted hard on Ring of Honor TV. As far as will it be promoted on TNA TV, that I don't know.
Now, as far as the championship there, Kyle O'Reilly defeating Adam Cole for the championship. What does this mean for Kyle O'Reilly? I'm guessing that means they've signed him?
I don't know that they signed him, but that was certainly the impression I got watching the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The whole thing was he was always supposed to win the championship on this show, and then when there was thought that he might not sign, there were other plans thrown in, and those other plans were dropped. So my gut is that I can't imagine them putting the championship on him unless he's agreed to stay. Just like with the Young Bucks and the Briscoes, the Young Bucks obviously signed. So because if they didn't, the Briscoes probably would have won that match.
Now, Young Bucks have signed, so let's talk about this. 2 years, Ring of Honor and New Japan, only allowed to work PWG in the U.S. Was this surprising to you that they didn't, make the move and go to WWE?
No, not really. Especially when I found out, I don't know the exact offer, but I know the ballpark and everything. And when I kind of heard it was like it was kind of like a no-brainer decision at that point. It's a great deal with them, and they get to keep their merch money, which in their case is pretty substantial. And they work a lot. It's not an easy schedule. They're probably going to work 90 matches, 100 matches in a year, but it's. And presumably, like an NXT schedule would probably be about the same, but they could be home with their family. They don't have to move to Florida if it was NXT, and if it was WWE, obviously the schedule would be much, much more difficult, and the road expense would be much higher, and they wouldn't have the same creative freedom, and there's just a lot of things. It was the move that made sense. It was really kind of, as best I could tell, it was kind of a no-brainer move, really.
Well, I salute them for having to be able to do it and not have to go to the WWE like almost everybody else does.
Yeah, you got to. I always give those guys all the credit in the world for the ability to make a really good living at this profession on their own terms, which very few people can do. A lot of people make a good living in the profession, but they're told what to do at all times, and these guys have. They're told what to do at certain times and everything, but they have a lot of creative freedom. And as part of the deal, they have a lot, they're going to have even more input into what they're doing. So, that's another benefit. And they're creative guys. So it really is the right deal for them for the next 2 years. And in 2 years, we'll see what the landscape is. I mean, we know everything's going to change in 2 years.
Yeah.
We just don't know we don't know how it's going to all shake out.
Exactly. One other name, too, quickly, Dave, I think we talked about last week as well. Lethal, is his contract not up at the end of the
Lethal's contract's up at the end of the year, yes.
Because I loved what they did with him and Cody Rhodes in that match at the pay-per-view as well.
Yeah, I didn't know that one was coming, and I liked it a lot because I don't think people expected it, but it's good for Cody Rhodes. I think he probably wants to he came in, did the babyface thing, and now I think he wants to make it as a heel. And I think that as a babyface, there was a certain level he was going to be. As a heel, I think that the ceiling is higher for him for right now. I mean, it may be down there in a year or two, babyface is better, but right now I think that for him, he can be. I think he can be a main event heel all over the Indies, and that's look, he quit WWE on his own, on his own. I'm sure he wants to be a main event heel, or a main event guy. He's not looking at just being, just coasting, so to speak.
Do you think he continues the program with Lethal in Ring of Honor, or was that
if Lethal stays? It makes all the sense in the world to continue it. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Right.
I don't know if Lethal's going to sign or not. I know Cody's committed for a while. And I don't know how long, but I think it's like at least 6 months and maybe longer.
Okay. Interesting.
Now, you mentioned the Hardys there and their contracts with TNA. What's that status? You said they're going to be up soon?
I think like March, I think is about right.
Now,
I know it's in the spring.
Now, looking at that, I mean, Matt Hardy is... one of the biggest comebacks that I've ever seen in professional wrestling as far as how relevant this guy is right now. What he's doing is turned his whole career around. It's fascinating to watch.
Yes, he's like Pillman in a lot of ways, I think. Not exactly, but just the idea of just creating a character that's completely unique that just absolutely caught on.
And because of that, do you foresee WWE putting feelers out? And
They have.
They already have.
The Hardys can go back to WWE if they want to. But the thing is, again, they would give up a lot of creative control and a lot of fun having the creative control going there. There would be more money in WWE if they were pushed, and they probably would be. And Jeff Hardy's a superstar, so he should be. And Matt's character's super over, so he should be as well. But then there's the thing on both guys are beat up physically and picking their own spots at their age and in their physical condition. It may be better for their bodies for the long term not to do the 200-day-a-year schedule. So there's a lot of different things. But if they went to WWE at this, in whatever it is, like in May or something like that, it wouldn't shock me at all. I mean, I know WWE would want them, and if I was WWE, I would want them. It's time, yeah.
Let's chat about something new WWE splashed on the air, where the Young Bucks might have ended up if they signed, and that's 205 Live. We've talked about it on this show. We weren't all that impressed as far as the show went. What was your first take on it?
The wrestling was kind of good. There were things I liked about it, but overall it was I would say a little bit of a disappointment. I think that the show with Gulak and Nice against the Bollywood Boys,
yeah,
I think that was a big mistake. I mean, normally, I know that the idea is to build the show, but I think that in this case, you really needed to open with like something absolutely statement making, and it was just a match. Rich Swann winning the championship was good. Watching fans leave in droves in the background while this championship match is going on was not good. The lack of crowd heat hurt, and it was predictable. I mean, we've talked about it for weeks. They really need to tape before and not live, because it's going to be like this every week. They're going to be people. The crowd's going to be leaving, and the heat's going to be down because they've already seen the SmackDown stars. And these guys are not, whether they're good wrestlers or bad wrestlers, they're not perceived as big enough stars to keep the audience interested at that late a juncture in the night. So they should be taped first.
Looking at NXT, Nakamura is the champion again. We're going to see this on Wednesday, and then we're going to get a rematch of Nakamura and Joe in Australia. Do you foresee the title going back to Joe again, or is this finally it, and we're going to just have Nakamura hold
with
on?
Bobby Roode being the next contender in San Antonio, I think that it makes more sense for Nakamura than Joe.
Yeah.
So I would say that probably Nakamura wins that cage match, and that's the blow-off. But, again, it's WWE. Anything can happen. But that's what I would see. And then at that point, I think it's ready. It's time for Joe and Nakamura to both go to the main roster. and really it's overdue for both of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joe especially. I think everybody's wanted to see him get up there. It's almost like he's trapped in NXT purgatory, and they just won't let him go any further.
Yeah, but he's done a great job there, but it's been too long.
Yeah.
I mean, like when he first came, it was like have a run and everything, but at that point, there was a point where it was like, okay, the main roster's thin and it really needs him, and Nakamura even more. I mean, Nakamura had overstayed his welcome in NXT like the second week he was there. I mean, it was like, how long is it going to take him to acclimate to U.S. style? And it was like, well, that first match with Sami Zayn, when it was over, was like, okay, he's acclimated himself to U.S. style. He's ready. He knows how to work this crowd.
And especially when you have shows like SmackDown where the roster is so thin. I mean, they need to make use of these guys.
Yeah, well, I think that in the new year we will see both guys up. At least Joe, I really think we will. Nakamura, I know I've heard people say there that Nakamura is going to stay longer and be the face of the company, and unfortunately that wouldn't be good, because if he was 26, I would say why not stay. But 36, 37, it's pretty much his time to go up.
Yeah.
Monday Night Raw this past week saw Sasha Banks once again win the women's title, beating Charlotte in the main event of Raw. A good main event. Do you see these? What do you see happening here? Is Charlotte going to get it back again? This is too much flip-flopping, in my opinion.
I don't know what the story is long-term, because originally, it was going to be Charlotte and Bayley for in the title program, and they switched. Charlotte and Sasha are, at this point, scheduled on the pay-per-view on the 18th in some sort of a stipulation match. It'll probably be announced tomorrow night. I don't know what the stip is, but that's what I've heard. And Charlotte always wins on pay-per-view, so does that mean she's going to win it back? I mean, I guess I'm leaning that way, but I don't know.
So much flip-flopping.
Yeah, it's so strange. And like
it is
you
a
said,
lot of flip-flopping. But it's like they have Sasha go over in these spectacular matches, and they go in the pay-per-view, and it's weird because if you were going to flip-flop, I mean, shouldn't Sasha have won the championship in Boston, and Charlotte have gained it in Charlotte?
Yeah, that would seem to make sense.
Completely.
Yeah.
Before we go, Dave, it was Hall of Fame week for you this week. Going into the Observer Hall of Fame, you got Dan O'Brien, Sting, Mean Gene, and James McLaughlin.
James McLaughlin, yeah.
Yep. So were you surprised at any of these? Sting finally in.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I was shocked or anything like that. I didn't know. Daniel Bryan, I was surprised didn't go in last year. And when he retired, I thought that he was a lock. And I thought Gene almost got in last year, and Gene should be in. And I don't think that there's really much of an argument against Gene in my mind. So I thought that in time he was going to be in for sure. So it made sense. And Sting had not gotten big support until last year, and then he had, this year, and then his career looks like it's really over. And so, yeah, it didn't surprise me or anything.
John brought up a good point when we were off the air about next year, Bill Goldberg being eligible, correct?
Bill Goldberg's going to be in the ballot next year, yeah.
And that's interesting because there's a bit of a parallel to Sting here with coming back. And this run that he's having right now, they're not making mistakes at the moment. Do you think he has a chance?
I don't know. I see Goldberg like Ultimate Warrior, and Ultimate Warrior hasn't gotten big support.
No.
The thing with Goldberg, I just don't feel that he had a long enough career to be a Hall of Famer. There are guys who had short careers that at the top or that are in the Hall of Fame for a short run. I shouldn't say short careers, because I was thinking of the original Tiger Mask is in for essentially a 3-year period, even though he actually wrestled like over 30 years. But he was such a groundbreaker and changed the game. And Bill was a big superstar, of course, but I don't think he changed the game or anything like that. And so to me, I would not vote for Bill Goldberg, just because I think that there's a lot of guys on the ballot that had longer careers and did more and everything like that, even though Bill, at his peak was probably a bigger star than almost anyone.
Dave, we've got to say goodbye for this week, but Observer this week, I'm guessing reports on once you get to watch TLC as well as the UFC from last night?
TLC, UFC, everything coming up this weekend, and God knows what kind of stuff's going to break on Tuesday and Wednesday this week.
All right. Before we go, by the way, great job on the Billy Corgan podcast that you did.
Oh, thank you.
I thought that was excellent, gave Billy's whole side of things, and it was really fascinating to listen to. It was a very good chat.
It was fast. It was, like the basics I think we all knew, but just the detail and everything about how it went down. I mean, it really was it was fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, you could just tell he's he's been a fan of yours for a long time, and definitely kind of was surprised at what he got into. So it was a really great chat.
Okay.
Great. We'll talk to you next week at the same time.
Okay, have a great week.
You too. Dave Meltzer, WrestlingObserver.com is where you can find that interview, as well as all of his other podcasts that he does, and the Wrestling Observer newsletter that you can go sign up for.